So this is a bit of a stretch to do a reactionary review on, but hey, I've read 5 books in this series, and that's a lot for me to invest in a series, and I'll probably read the rest of the series. I admit I have a certain guilty pleasure for things that are like wish fulfillment fantasy books that kind of read like fan fiction. I'd call this good fan fiction, but it's still fan fiction, despite it not really being fan fiction of anything in particular. So the Demon Accords are an interesting series. They're an urban fantasy series. It kind of reminds me of a bit like Dresden Files or Anita Blake, something kind of like that, but more fan fictiony and more kind of male wish fulfillment. It's kind of almost like a male version of Twilight mixed with Wanted, mixed with like Harry Potter, mixed with Star Wars or something. So it's a very it's interesting. So let me just try to like talk a bit about what it is. So it's urban fantasy slash horror. I'm not really sure where the line between horror ends and fantasy begins because they're kind of the same thing. The difference tends to be more thematic than anything because you can have vampires in both, but just because you have vampires in a fantasy doesn't necessarily mean it's horror or vice versa. Sorry, I'll stop on my pontificating on that point. So the basic background of the Demon Accords is the main character is Chris Gordon. And Chris Gordon's family when he was young was killed by a demon. And he starts off as an exorcist. For whatever reason, he was born with the ability to exorcise demons from people by ripping them out, and then a giant hawk, which is shown here that he named Kirby, takes them back to hell. So he spent his life as a demon hunter. He's kind of isolated. He has a bit of the tism, but he's also kind of a smartass and a little awkward. So basically, he kind of is like the average person reading the book, who is probably a male 16 to 30 age range, who's probably a bit awkward and probably isn't really aware of their own abilities, etc. So he's very much kind of the target audience for this book. And he works for the police. And one night, he goes to a vampire themed club called Plasma, and there he saves a absurdly beautiful vampire girl from being killed by one of the demons. And he almost dies himself, and she feeds him some of his blood and she drinks some of his blood, and they become inextricably linked together. It turns out her name is Tanya, and she's a special kind of vampire because she's the only natural born vampire, because apparently her mother was pregnant when she was turned, and she'd been just kind of waiting around for the last 300 years, and then she was born all of a sudden at the exact same moment Chris Gordon was. And they're both, yeah, so they immediately kind of grow closer together, and Chris starts to develop super abilities that just get more Mary Sue-ish as time goes on, and Tanya just gets more Mary Sue-ish as time goes on. But the good thing is the book series doesn't really take itself too seriously. Characters frequently remark on the absurdity of the situation, like how overpowered Chris is, how overpowered Tanya is, and they don't really know what to make of it. And there is actually an explanation presented, and you might want to skip ahead 20 seconds, you don't want to be spoiled. They're both incarnated angels. Yeah, so apparently they were both angels who chose to be reborn as humans, etc. The Demon Accords is apparently an agreement between God and the devil that limits how powerful beings can get on this plane and what can happen. So, like, demons can possess people, but they aren't allowed to bring full demons into the world. And elder gods, lowercase g gods, who are really powerful, aren't allowed to stay on this plane. And so the thing is, despite their immense powers, They just keep getting their faces in like more and more over the top stuff. Like in book 3, or is it 2? It's 2 and 3. There's a group called Loki's Spawn, which is like an international drug cartel slash biker gang of cannibalistic werebeasts. And we have like a scene near the end where Tanya and Chris are like fight off like 60 of them. And it's awesome because Tanya uses like tungsten carbide swords, and Chris gains the Suish ability to form micro edge auras like around his fists and stuff. And they just beat the crap out of everything that lives because they're soulmates, and so Chris just keeps getting all these abilities, but there's kind of like it's treated with a lot of humor. Like him being overpowered and not a vampire means he has to eat 8 to 10,000 calories a day normally, and if he's fighting, he needs to eat like 20,000 calories a day because he still expends energy. Normally, he's just like it's the energy drain on him is the same as if a normal person was expending the amount of power to like move at super speed and have like super strengths and stuff. And like it just gets more absurd as time goes on. Like in the first book, there's a group of demons and witches who have hold of an elder god, an elder bear god, who's a cave bear. Or no, I think it's flat face bear. Yeah, invisible flat face bear that can teleport that he names Oquali. And yeah, he saves Oquali, and like there's a part near the end of the first book where one of like the elder vampires, there's only 3 elder vampires, who's like one of the most powerful beings in existence, is monologuing at him. And because Chris saved him, Oquali just shows up and just squishes him flat. And like later on, he threatens the president because the president's gonna send in like special forces to take him down. And Oquali like teleports into the president's bunker and teleports back. And you just have like crazy stuff like that. There's werewolves. There's mind reading vampires. There's like secret government organizations. There's like 5 or 6 different secret government organizations. They're at like war with each other. There's demons. There's just like all this just random supernatural lore thrown in together. And like I said, Chris is kind of like the unassuming but talented male who is just not appreciated. But then suddenly he gets whisked into this world with this absurdly hot vampire soulmate, his superpowers, like he gets money and stuff. So it's very much that. It's very much just over the top insanity, but it all works because, like I said, it doesn't take itself too seriously. I mean, they have a good story, they have plots. Occasionally, the main characters get challenged, but they do focus a fair amount on how you can overcome super beings, mainly like attacking the ones they care about, finding out certain weaknesses, that kind of thing. And they kind of have to try to navigate the supernatural world when neither of them really know much about it. Chris because he's never been involved with it, and Tanya because she's only like 22 or 23 or something. And I'll give them credit. Tanya isn't blonde. She has she has black hair, which is she has blue eyes though. Chris also has the Mary Sue-ish trait of having purple eyes. But you know what? I've never really cared much about Mary Sue's. The thing with Mary Sue's is they really become bad when they're unlikable. See, to a certain extent, even I guess you could say kind of Luke earned it, but him and Anakin have these natural abilities that are just far beyond what anybody else had, and they didn't necessarily earn them. They just they were innate. But the difference is Anakin and Luke are likable, whereas someone like Rey is not likable. And same thing with Neo. Neo is has all these like super abilities that aren't explained until the second movie, really. And even then, they aren't really explained that well. But you like Neo, you sympathize with him, you relate with him, and it kind of becomes kind of a wish fulfillment. Like you empathize. If the Mary Sue you can empathize with, and you can kind of get inside of their head, then you're kind of living vicariously through them. You're going along through all of their kind of adventures and their experiences, and it's fun. When you have someone like Ray who's bland and boring and completely uninteresting, or Micaiah is another big one, or what Anita Blake eventually becomes in that series, then it's a problem because it goes from being just kind of fun over the top shenanigans to just boring bad writing. And like the supporting characters are all like good too in the Demon Accords. Like Christian's grandfather is like a devout Catholic conservative ex-military guy who lives in upstate New York and hates liberals, and he's pretty awesome. He lives on like a farm. There's Tanya's not bad. There's Sanka, I think is how you pronounce her name, who's the head of the Coven for North America, and she's technically Tanya's grandmother. Figure that one out. Well, there's an explanation. She bit Tanya's mother, which makes her grandfather, and she's really like she has her posh British accent. And she's really excitable. There's like a mind reader vampire. There's Chris's like nerdy best friend Chet. There's just a variety of like likable, fun characters, and it's kind of hard to describe because like when you see a movie and it's clear the cast is having a lot of fun making it. That's I think one of the things that most makes a movie good is when it's clear like everybody's having fun, they're enjoying it. Like the Fast and the Furious movies are like that. Like you can tell it when they're making those, whether you like them or not, that the actors are legitimately friends and they legitimately like each other, and that they're just having a good time making it. You can even find that in the Star Wars movies. It's clear in a lot. Well, the original ones. That's kind of one of the issues with the rebuild or the reboot. Is it's just no one really wants to be there. Like Harrison Ford did the biggest phone-in performance of a career that for the last 20 years has been phone-in performances. And I think he like asked them to like just kill my character off or I won't be in the next movie. And it's clear like just no one gave a shit. It's I find that in a lot of Marvel movies. The actors just act like they don't really care and they want to be anywhere but there. So it's kind of weird to say in the book, but kind of everybody in this book series, maybe it's because I'm listening to it on an audio book, so the narrator provides a lot of this. You get the impression that the characters are all just kind of happy going along for a ride. That they're like just taking the absurdity of the world as it comes, and they're just kind of having fun with it. So it's very easy to make, and a lot of them are like stories about the supernatural world are either like super quirky comedies that are just unbearable, or they're really depressing things about like immortality and how it's a curse and how the world's so bad. It's kind of fun. It's a bit like Highlander, the TV show, where it's like maybe immortality and having superpowers and stuff isn't such a bad thing. And maybe it's kind of cool to be a badass, like whatever Christian is by this point. So yeah, it's a good series. I really enjoyed it. I'd recommend it. It's not for everybody. Probably a lot of people here will just find it too cheesy or absurd or over the top or unrealistic. But I don't know. I think it's a lot of fun. So that's my review of it. And have a good day, everybody.